North Carolina, right? Like if you look at any one of their individual losses in their four, none of them look bad on their own. But you go lose to Alabama by 15 points, and that doesn't seem bad. You lost in overtime to Michigan State, doesn't seem bad. Auburn's probably the best team in the country. You lose to them, but then I look at the Dayton game that they played in their tournament they were in. They were losing that game the entire time. They're very close to having 4 losses in a row here. Their guards were able to bring them back in the game from I think like 21 down. I was messing with Henson actually. I put money on North Carolina like halfway through the game. They ended up coming back to win. But I mean, I think that string of games is the biggest surprise to me. And then this Alabama loss is just kind of icing on the cake.
What was that? What was the odds on that money line for you, Kenny, when you took Carolina when they were down, man?
Oh, it was like plus 320. It was like plus 320.
Okay,
man.
all right, cool. So when we connect in person, then man, a round is on you, man, for sure.
All right, sounds good.
Hey, I don't know how do you argue against that. And to your point, they were up. They had a hell of a comeback to beat Dayton. I mean, they were down 21 in the second half, so they very well could have lost 4 games in a row. This team has forgot how to defend right now. They're not defending. And we know that they don't have rim protection. We know that they were going to miss Armando Bacot. But right now, collectively, they got to find a way. They got to continue. They got to get back to guarding. Carolina can score. Like, they're giving up over 80 points a game. They're giving up like 82 a game. And they play at a fast pace, so I expect other teams doing it. But they collectively, you don't have to have shot blocking, but you can come over and take charges. Like it would, the Alabama game looked like a layup line. And again, you were right there. You made a 3 to force overtime in the Michigan State game. It's just been a tale of two halves. They have been down by double figures in the first half, by 14 or more in the last 4 games, even going back to that Dayton game. And for whatever reason, I mean, obviously they don't know right away or why this is happening, or they would have fixed it. But they're coming out with slow starts. And they're lucky. They're lucky they had that hell of a comeback against Dayton. Or we're talking about 4 straight losses. And they got a game this weekend, Saturday at Georgia Tech. They get a chance to right the ship. And you don't know what to expect even with that game, because Georgia Tech got 2 starters that have been out of their lineup, and you don't know if those guys are coming back in Wasey Reeves and Javion McCullum. So Carolina, the way that game was, it reminded me of like the Purdue game tonight. This final score, it wasn't indicative of how that game was. I don't think anybody from the time that game started thought Alabama was going to lose that game. And even when Carolina came back and made a little run. So you got to be concerned, I think, because you thought this team would be defending better. I thought they kind of started out, we thought they would. But when they played, as the talent increased, they hadn't been able to get stops. And that's why this early in this year, throw the analytical stuff and the numbers out. I mean, throw those numbers out. When you measure Carolina, we got to measure them off of the Maui Invitational and seeing how they went from there. We got to for Dayton, and we got to we saw them against Kansas again. First half, looked like they were going to get ran out of the gym, and then they come storming back in that game. So can Carolina put 2 halves together? Is yet to be seen. But the disturbing thing is they're not defending worth a damn. Like, that's just not something that they're doing right now. There's no secret to that. And right. ACC play kicks off this weekend, and they better get it together. They better start defending, or it's going to be a really long year for the Tar Heels.
Yeah, I mean, a couple of opportunities back at home, as you mentioned, against Georgia Tech, but then also LaSalle before they face off against Florida on their neutral court with the Jumpman Invitational over there in Charlotte. So, I mean, yeah, neutral court, but it's still going to be held in Charlotte. So you would expect it to feel like a home game for North Carolina, especially if they can win back-to-back games after dropping 3 straight. Look, I'm going to be honest. I'm worried if North Carolina can beat a ranked team moving forward. Like, like, I know it's early, RC, and I understand what you're saying about just throwing some of the stats out and the analytics stuff out early in the season. But to your point, if they can't defend, who are they going to beat? And I know the Michigan State game went into overtime, but if you're giving up 94 points to Michigan State, we know Michigan State at times, and really more times than not, is offensively challenged, right? I mean, they want to play a slow down, methodical game, make it physical. But those things can't happen if you're North Carolina. And so when I mentioned just the pulse and the heart, they have to figure out something. And I'm looking at guys like RJ Davis, who is come back for another season in North Carolina. He has to be better because I would hope that guys are still looking at him as the leader and that he can lead them moving forward. But right now, it feels like they're in search of a leader just because RJ is going through, he has his offensive slumps and his lulls where he's just shooting very poorly. I mean, the numbers are there with that. But they have to find something for themselves moving forward. And maybe they find it against Georgia Tech and LaSalle before they face off against another ranked team in Florida. But it's going to be a big concern, really, for Tar Heel fans and everybody out there. I know John Henson was speaking to this the other night on After Dark on Field 68 about just the back line of defense. That front court has been so non-existent at protecting the rim and defending the paint. And I know that it's not just all on them. Like, guards have to do a better job of controlling the ball. But still, when you realize that as a guard, and RC, you can speak better to this than me and Kenny, once you beat that first wave of defense and knowing that that opponent does not have any rim protection or paint presence defensively, you're like, oh, I'm about to show out tonight. Like, you look, I'm about to call all my family and tell them to make sure that they put on the ESPN Sports Center highlights because I got off.
Cam, that's what I meant when I say throw the analytics out. Because if you take away the American and Hawaii game, I'm talking about they gave up 94 to Michigan State, 85 to Auburn, 90 to Dayton, and Kansas, and 92 to Kansas, right? So that's what I'm judging them off of. So when I say throw away the analytics, so if you start looking at the other teams, it looks better. Elon only scored 76, right? American scored 55. That makes it look better. I'm just judging them off of when I put the kind of caliber that they're going to play against in the ACC and the level that they're playing against. That's what I'm saying. Like, you're giving up almost 90 a game. Like, you got to guard somebody. So the effort's there individually with certain guys. I think Elliot Cadeau, he's gotten in foul trouble in a couple of games. They can't play without him. One other thing, and I say this about Carolina that concerning on the offensive end, and they scoring, right? I think it's still an adjustment for those three guards. Seth Trimble, who is probably their most consistent player offensively. He's been the most consistent player, I think, all year for them. Both sides of the ball, I don't even think that's within question. But he's better with the ball in his hands. RJ Davis was a full-time point guard. Then he's kind of went a mixture, and then now he's more off the ball. But I think everybody would acknowledge RJ Davis is better with the ball in his hands. And then Elliot Cadeau is the point guard, and he can dominate a game with the ball in his hands of evolving. But then when you don't have bigs, you can't finish. Washington and these guys, they're finishing inside. They're smoking these layups. They can't finish in traffic. Finding consistency doing that is putting so much pressure on those three guys trying to figure out a way. The freshman, Jackson has done. He's done well. I mean, they've had some moments, man, for some other guys, but defensively right now, I mean, it's only gonna get worse. And those bigs got it because Armando was the big thing we're talking about. The same reason I said about Braden Smith is saying the same thing about RJ Davis. They're scheming him now. He doesn't have Armando back there. Like I'll say this, when Armando set a ball screen against Carolina, teams were so worried because he was so dominant rebounding that all you had to do as a guard was nobody was switching. You weren't switching a guard on Armando because you got no shot at he was grabbing every rebound. Now he's gone. They go from Carolina being one of the best rebounding teams in the country to now they're even rebounding. And that's not what Carolina has been. They're not getting any offensive rebounds. They're gang rebounding defensively, but it's really hurting them, and they're not getting enough stops to run as much as they usually can. They run after makes and everything else, but it's a big alarm, man. I don't know where this team goes because there's so many things that are going on around, but the biggest thing is you got to start guarding, take some freaking charges. Right. You got to do something because right now this is you got to be concerned.